Good evening, fellow heretics. Welcome to tonight's episode of Nerds and Heresy. I'm your host, Captain Dadpool.
And I'm Natty Nat.
And you're watching Nerds and Heresy.
Hold on to your butts.
Okay, so here's the stitch, you guys. Here's the situation. We were supposed to be joined by Dr. Jennifer Bird. She was not able to join us last minute. I have not heard from her. I don't know if she forgot about the interview or if she didn't get the emails I sent to her. But in any case, she's not here. So this makes things a bit awkward. But we're going to drive on anyway. And we're going to continue with our topic because Natalie...
Because I'm a woman.
has some things to say about this.
Yeah, let's hear about
so
it.
we can absolutely continue forward with the topic. Starting with issues pertaining to women in scholarship. I know some of you may not be familiar with the internet drama surrounding Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou and the criticism she received from Dr. Falk.
I am one of those that is unaware of what's going on.
I'll catch you up to speed.
So
Dr. Stavrakopoulou
right.
wrote this book, God and Anatomy. And she argues in this book that in antiquity, it was believed that God had a physical body. And there's a chapter that talks about his genitalia in relation to a verse in Ezekiel, where it says, Ezekiel's looking up and he says, I saw the train of his robe and it filled the temple.
Mm-hmm.
The argument can very strongly be made that the author is talking about God's genitalia. God was well hung, in other words.
Oh.
I've heard from Dr. Kip Davis, and he says this is a very plausible interpretation of this verse. But in any case, this is an argument that's been made before, but is not made very frequently or very aggressively. But she made this argument in this book, and she got a lot of flack for it because by a lot of Christian guys, Christian apologists. One man in particular is named Dr. Falk. He's an Egyptologist, I believe.
I don't think I know Dr. Falk.
Was that?
I don't think I know Dr. Falk either. Hold on, I'm Googling him.
Yeah, he so he did a live stream. It was probably a month or so ago now, and he responded to this. So somebody asked him, "What do you think about Dr. Francesca Stavrakopoulou's work?" And he's like, "Yeah, I don't think very much about it." And he said the only reason her scholarship is being taken seriously is because she's physically attractive. And she is. And she has a wonderful voice. I have the audiobook of this. She sounds like Laura Croft from Tomb Raider, if y'all know who that is.
Oh, she has like that voice. Oh, that's cool as hell.
Yeah. I could listen to her read like an instruction manual on how to operate a forklift, and I would just I'd be in heaven.
I love it when I find people with voices like that. Those are the best things.
Yeah. So, but Dr. Falk said that's the only reason this scholarship is being taken seriously is because she's physically attractive. And he said, I quote, this is what happens when you do theology by cup size. Out of nowhere, for no reason whatsoever, he's just saying, yeah, she has tits. And that's why so many people...
There's my argument. Breast disease.
Breast disease. That's why so many people are paying attention to her, because she has tits and nice hair and facial structure.
That's
whatever.
lovely.
I
mean, well, it's beyond that. I mean, there is an argument for attractive people tend to be listened to a little better, but
yes, I
that's
100% agree with that.
Psychology thing. That's kind of
hello.
Yeah, that's a whole hello.
How y'all doing?
You. But yeah. God. By cup size? That's really what he said?
Theology by cup size. That's what he said. I wish I had a clip prepared.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. Wow. That's very
and
God, that's abrasive. That's horrible.
Yeah.
I don't even know what she looks like, but like it sounds like she's awesome. Like it just sounds like she's a cool chick. But from the way she's being described and criticized, because I mean, let's be honest, one of the things that every girl goes through in high school is if you get picked on by the other girls, it's because you're prettier than them. And that's always been the reaction. It's like, oh, don't worry about it, dear. It's because you're prettier than them. But it's
and they're jealous.
Yeah. And then like if the guys do it, it's like if you ever get called a slut, it's because you're too pretty for the guy to get. And so automatically, I mean, this goes back to fucking high school dynamics. This is stupid. Like, I hate to say it, but it's fucking stupid.
It is. And my argument, because this argument that Dr. Falk made was supported by Doug of Pine Creek.
Oh.
He's probably the most well-known conservative atheist YouTuber.
Yeah, I'm aware of him.
Yeah,
I'm aware of him.
He was joined by, oh my God, who was it?
Please tell me it wasn't Thad or whatever. What's his name? Is it Thad?
Than? No.
Than. I really want Than's opinion on this. I want him to chime in.
Really?
I'm kind of curious about it, yeah, because I don't know what side he would take, and I'm really curious to see what he would do.
I'm interested. I'd be interested to hear that too, and Stevens as well, of exploring Christianity. Anyway, but God, I can't remember his name. Anyway, he's a popular. He's another big Christian apologist YouTuber, but he came in and went against her position, and Doug agreed with him, and he made that statement like, yeah, she's attractive, sex sells, that's why she's getting this attention.
I hate to say it, but why is that a problem? I've always been taught use what you have, and if using her sexuality is a way to get her own ideas out there, great, good for her. Like all the power to her. Like I'm not upset with that at all.
That's what kills me about these fuckers.
Her argument. She could be arguing the dumbest thing in the world, and I would still be like, good for her. She's using what she has to get it out there. Great, awesome.
That's what kills me about these people is when they talk about politics, they're very, very pro-capitalism. And then when a woman uses her beauty to sell something, suddenly they're against capitalism.
Right. Especially if it's a woman that's arguing for a Christian value or something along those lines. I haven't read the book, so I don't know her opinions on this, but the fact that she is saying God is well hung, I'm surprised no one's like, yeah, well, I'm endowed like God. Like I expect.
That's what kills me is, why wouldn't you think like Christians would like grasp?
Christians would be like, hell yeah, God has the best.
She's right. God's got a big dangle. Yeah.
Why wouldn't they jump on board with that?
But no, and that's
that, like, you're sexualizing God. Which, if that's the case, then why didn't she make a case for he has a big dick and probably a good vagina? Like, why not both? Could he be a transvestite? I am just bringing up random topics. I mean, all of this is just as credible as the concept of, no, he doesn't have a big dick. Why are you talking about that?
Yeah. There's a verse in Job specifically. I think it's 29 or chapter 29, verse 39, where God is described as a father who has a womb. Literally, he's like, whose womb were you birthed from? I am your father. So it's like, interesting, right?
And you know what? That just made a case for trans men. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
All this is leading up to, and then all those laws that got passed recently via the fucking, what was it, Kentucky, Tennessee,
Kentucky, Ohio.
Yeah,
Florida,
like fuck.
Texas.
Sorry, that's just I've been out of it for a while. I've been kind of focused on school stuff, so I've not been paying attention to anything political. And then like I hopped on TikTok and did doom scrolling for a while, and I'm like, oh god, there's shit going on that I've just completely missed.
I am jealous. Yeah,
that I've been out of it. Yeah. Don't be jealous. I've had the stress for other things, but yeah. Oh, I love Korea. Korea, you're amazing. Just like pops out the verse, like, oh, I know that one.
Yeah. Oh, that's because she learned that verse from me.
Oh, that'll do it. Oh, side note.
I'm totally remember the specific verse off my head.
I'm totally having an ADHD moment, but I should tell you this.
Oh God.
I had someone on my face of books message me and like share a link that says you should use Florida Man in place of Jesus or in place of God for different biblical verses. And I was like, and like tell the story via Florida Man, like headlines. And I was like, cool. Florida Man builds boat, doesn't let other people in. Like Florida Man wrecks a marketplace, blames a fig tree. Just,
hold on.
I thought it was funny. That was my bad. I know. The kiddos are awake. We're not used to this.
Yes, I know. I got to make you something else for dinner. But dinner's not for another hour, so you're fine. If you're hungry, get a snack. Yeah, close the back door.
Go to the snack drawer. I left Oreos last time. It's been a while though. There's no Oreos.
The frustration with doing a show
while the kiddos are awake.
The kids have gone to bed.
That is true. That is fair.
So
yes, Florida Man sends all 42 boys to death. Exactly. I just thought those headlines were like really funny, and I've been playing with them ever since. But that was my random ADHD moment. But yeah, no, back to God's junk, which is apparently up for debate.
Well, so my frustration with the criticism she's received is how good of a scholar does an attractive woman have to be for her scholarship to be taken seriously?
Oh, this is the fun part.
Because if you're an ugly old white guy, your scholarship's taken seriously immediately.
Well, right? To an extent. There's like 80% of the time, yeah, you're taken seriously. 20% of the time, it's like, how crazy of an old man are you? Like, there's this counterbalance there. But with women,
nobody takes your physical appearance into account.
Yeah,
they'll scrutinize your scholarship, your research, what you've published. Like they will look at the work that you've done.
I know a few
to
women
determine if it should be taken seriously or not, right. If it's fringe, if there's an idea to it or whatnot. At no point is your balding white head taken into account.
I can see the
future making those with decisions.
Your crystallized, your cranium.
If an attractive woman produces the same scholarship, suddenly that's the first thing.
Yeah.
That's taken into account. Oh yeah. You're attractive.
No, I would name some names. I'm not going to though, but I do know a few women who have used professors that they've had in the past. They all have PhDs now. Like these are women that I've graduated with that have used the names of their professors, both women and men alike, to make sure that their credentials are solid because they are attractive. They have worried about the outcome of their papers based off of their own physical appearance because they're so criticized.
You mean because they themselves are attractive?
They know that they're attractive, so they put names that they know already have credentials with them. They'll call in and say, hey, can you peer review this? Can I put your name on my paper? They do that to,
Yes. Go ahead.
I mean, this is a skill set that you are taught in grad school in order to build up your metaphorical scholarship wall, like your intellectual wall, your barrier. Because if you have multiple names on your paper that have been argued with or have background, normally men, not going to say not all, but like I know back in like the 80s, a lot of the time people would want like Margaret Mead to be one of their people on their paper because she was good back then. Now there's a lot of regarding that, but like you would call in the experts in your field to back you up if you are a woman publishing something, so that you have backup.
Hey, speaking of women who publish things, Dr. Jennifer Bird has joined us.
Yay!
Hey, did I have the wrong start time? Apparently I did. I had 14.
No, it's okay.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah,
Hi. Yes. Hi, Natty. Natty Nat.
Yeah, this Dr. Bird. This is Natty Nat. She's a professional Jew archaeologist.
Yeah.
And now kind of environmental scientist. We're working on the label.
Okay.
She
There's
does
a lot of
things
labeling
with
going
dirt
on.
and rocks.
I do a lot of dirt stuff, and that tends to be a very, like, the soils go from rocks to biology to ecology to environmental science to kind of covers everything. So
Indeed.
geoarchaeologists encompass a lot of that.
So Dr. Bird, you reside in Roanoke, Virginia. Is that right?
I am. I'm in Virginia. Yes, Roanoke, Virginia.
Yeah.
Cool. I grew up in Hampton, Virginia.
Okay. Yeah, I spent a couple years down in Virginia Beach, that kind of that part of the state. Yeah.
Yeah, I lived there for like 15 years.
I'm from the Midwest, you know.
Oh, okay. I was wondering. Yeah.
But I'm in North Carolina now.
Which part of the state? Oh
yeah.
Which part of the state?
Of
North Carolina. Which part?
Right now I'm in Asheville.
Gotcha. Very cool part of this. Very nice part, right?
Mm-hmm. Very pretty.
Yeah.
I was in bloom right now. It's so pretty.
Indeed. Oh my gosh, I love all the azaleas and.
Oh, those are just budding.
Yeah,
okay.
So
it's not quite the season yet, but
okay. Yeah, I spent a couple years, 6 years in Greensboro, and I just love spring. Yeah, in that part of the state. Yeah. I'm so sorry about the start time.
It's okay.
I'm usually 15 minutes early, not 20 minutes late.
We decided to just branch in
So good. I'm just glad you're
good. Okay.
We were just talking about the issues that women face in scholarship. That's kind of where we started.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Are you familiar with the internet drama surrounding Dr. Francesca Stravocapoulou and Dr. David Falk?
Mm-hmm.
I have our book here.
Nice.
And I have your book as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I'm only about halfway through it. I didn't get to finish it before the interview.
Nice.
But it's very good, and I highly
recommend
it.
I am a bad person.
I highly recommend checking it out.
I have not read anything yet, and I need to. I've ordered it.
Have you? Oh, well,
I did.
thanks.
I ordered it, but that is all I have at the moment.
That's my second book. My first book is a dissertation, so not many people want to read that. But
I like dissertation.
Yeah, no, I know you do. Yeah.
I read the really boring stuff. I love it.
Totally right. Yeah.
My favorite dissertation of all time is Ken Ham's.
It's so great to pick apart. It's everything you need to not have in a dissertation. Like if you're going to go through a grammar class in like grad school and you have to talk about how to write your dissertation, it is such a good example of all the things not to do. So great.
It's fantastic. Oh my god.
Yeah, I can't even imagine doing that to myself, actually. Looking at Ken Hams of all people. Yeah.
Anyway.
Things we do for fun, right?
Okay, so where were we?
Well, I was talking about how
women
when they go into writing a dissertation or trying to publish any papers, a lot of times if they are worried about scrutiny or if they know that they tend to get scrutinized due to their physical outlook, they will reach out to those that have been scrutinized in the past or those that are already professionals in the field that they're in to put their name in with them on the paper to protect them in some way. It's almost like the name becomes armor. And it's something that I see happen a lot in biology. It's very, very common in the biological sciences.
I believe that.
That's where I was at, just throwing those out there. I know personally.
And my point was, if you're an old white guy who produces a scholarly work, nobody questions it. Well, they question the work itself, but they scrutinize the material, your sources, the research you've done, your qualifications, your background, everything. But they do not ever question the fact that you're bald. That never comes to question. But when you're an attractive woman, that is the first thing they look at. In the case of Dr. Stavrakopoulos, when David Falk was like, "Yeah, you're attractive," so that automatically like brings your scholarship down a notch. Why?
Because you can't be pretty and smart. It doesn't work that way. Duh.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's anyway.
Well, and in particular, with Stavrakopoulos, she is doing what I think is pretty just kind of very counter to the narrative kinds of work, but she's just solid, and she's kind of, even-handed, and she's doing her thing. And this is the deal, folks. Like, if you study it without these literate, like, religious biases, you're going to see this stuff. And so, it's not just because she's a woman in academia, but because she's trotting out some basic, but seriously counter to the way people think about it stuff. So, at least in my field, there are women who are welcome because they're in line with the more patriarchal narratives, right? Or the more patriarchal way of doing things. They're not actually disrupting traditional scholarship. They're contributing to it.
Don't change the status quo.
Right. And so they're welcome, right? They're welcome in these spaces. Whereas women who are trying to challenge and stir things up and make things what I would call better and more more with the times, people, they are the ones who and they also happen to be attractive, so we're just going to go there, and as it's a way to as if saying someone's beautiful is a problem, with their intellect. But if she weren't challenging traditional scholarship, nobody would even care. Do you know what I mean?
Point. Yeah, well, I was so one of the things is, I think it's interesting that they've picked, of all the topics that she is discussing, they've picked the one where she uses God and sexualizes him. Right. And it's almost like, it's like the irony of it. It's the irony of throwing the fact that God could be well endowed and like, oh God, like, what do we do? Like, either the men are like, yes, we were made in his image. Awesome.
I'm also endowed.
Like, that's where I was like, or they're like completely chastising it and be like, oh, God can't be sexualized. That's not how this works. Like, it's like, no, it's just shun. Like, we can't think of that because that's another man's dick, and obviously it's God. So it's
and it's so weird because in all these like ancient myths pertaining to a god who created the universe, be it Amun of Egyptian mythology or El in Canine mythology, like, they created the earth with their dick. They ejaculated in some way, shape, or form the earth into existence. And then all of a sudden
they gave birth.
And then all of a sudden
they're
like,
the
whoa.
Thing was more of a deal, but like, as soon as the womb like let everything out, it just reformed and made like a dick. Magic. Yeah. Sorry.
Earliest.
I'm Dr. Bird. I'm Maddie. I'm a little abrasive.
No. I'm only turning it down because I don't know either one of you, so I'm just trying to let you two show me the set the standard here, because I'm also a little toned down because I don't normally work on Sunday. What was that?
Yeah, where it's the format is very casual.
No. I know. I'm
much more of a listener. Nat's
not bringing
a talker.
Yeah, no. I was just trying to say, Natty, I'm out totally fine with all of it. I'm just kind of calm and a little toned down myself today, but yeah. And also, I don't know. There was something you were saying about women creating and then men taking over. I mean, that's kind of a thing in general throughout history, right? Women get things started, and then once it needs to be organized, then we have men in charge, you know? Like, that's like a documented thing throughout history.
Wait,
But in particular in relation to the church, by the way,
Hold on,
like,
hold
which
on,
is
hold
my
on.
relative
not
realm.
just the church, but
When-
religion as a whole.
Yes,
It's
right?
not just, it's any sort of it's, I don't want to say every single time, but there is a high probability that anytime a religious structure or some form of cultish worship is created, that there is a man that will put himself in charge and ahead of a woman, but
Right.
without acknowledging the birth of said concept, without so
Yeah. Or the structure that came into being because of the women's work
Right,
behind the scenes. And
So-
now that we want to get all official and give labels and titles, right?
right, yeah. That's
So
Then it
you
needs
just
to be men in
said
charge.
that women will organize something,
Yeah.
and then a man will come and take it over.
Precisely. That happened. Like, I actually read about that first within the realm of business,
Oh yeah. Oh,
right?
Oh my
Businesses,
gosh,
yeah.
yes. I did anthropology and business and
You-
marketing, and oh my
Nice.
god,
Right?
the concepts where like women will have these idea boards, they'll go through it, come up with an idea, and a man will present it and get all the credit.
Totally.
You kind of touch on that in your
little
book
bit.
a little bit in relationship to the leadership in the early church.
Yes.
Which I'd love to talk about.
Let's talk about it.
Go for it.
Because from my understanding, the role of women in the early church was to facilitate the gatherings of the Christians. They were the homemakers, the housekeepers, and they would welcome the Christians in to sing or give, have feasts or whatever in their home, and that's why they were put in leadership roles by like Paul. But then it would kind of be overshadowed by other men. Yeah, like they'd be like, greet Priscilla and Aquila, but also, and I don't even know where I'm going with this rant. I'm just
No. I wanted to listen to where you're headed, and then we'll chime in. Yeah.
So in the I love to criticize Paul because it's easy to do.
It is so easy to
He
do.
makes it so easy for us, right?
Yeah.
He just
But
right into it.
I'm all too willing to give credit where credit is due. Like, I will say Paul was fairly progressive for his time. Like,
I think there were some moments where he is influenced. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do think there were moments he's influenced by the more egalitarian or the more, some of the cultures around him.
Certainly.
That are like embracing women in leadership and things like that, and in particular in Western Asia Minor, so modern day Turkey.
Can you talk more about that, please?
Yeah. I mean, so the one thing I did want to offer a suggestion, because I don't ever feel like correcting is the right thing, because we're all looking at sources or texts and trying to read and interpret, and some of us have access to some of the context more than others. But I thought that's why I was just intent on listening to what you're saying, because your take on one of the reasons, suggesting that one of the reasons Paul was affirmative of women in leadership is because they were the ones running the household. And that is where the Christian churches met for the first couple hundred years, is in homes. And so that was I was just intrigued by the way you put that language. I do, and partly
Feel
because
free to tell me I'm wrong.
I don't think it's necessarily that you're wrong. I thought that was an interesting way to interpret the data and to make sense of what we do see, which is that women were seen as ministers or heads of these churches at times, perhaps because the churches were meeting in their homes and they were the head of they were the woman running the show in whatever. But this particular element of Paul finding a way to hold on to something, to tap into something that gives women power, right? Women and enslaved peoples, right? So that sneaky little line in Galatians 3:28, it's hard to make too much of it, but I and other feminist biblical scholars have tried to make quite a bit out of it in the past. I fully admit that, because it's radical to say in Christ, in this space that I've created. I'm creating this new sect of Judaism, basically. In this space, Jews and Gentiles don't. That label doesn't matter anymore. In this space, free and enslaved doesn't matter, and neither do male and female. And so this is a pretty radical, egalitarian or democratic kind of a way to structure things. It's also nearly impossible to live up to, right? Because of precisely what you said, right? Which is, these are household spaces that are run by the head of the household, even though everybody knows the woman is in charge of everything, whether that's the rearing of children or if you have enslaved people, she's still running the show over them. But it's the man then, as now, who gets the credit for running the household. So so how do you go from that framework and ideology and everybody's roles, 23/6 or whatever, 23/7, right? And for 1 or 2 hours of the week, everybody shifts gears and we're all going to be equal for just an hour or two every week. And you think an enslaved person is going to be able to step up and say what they need to say? Not when their master's around, you know what I mean? So I think it's a really interesting thing that we have captured in one of the writings of Paul, to have him saying something so radically democratic. And yet the next chapter, he reverts back to talking about enslavement for one of the more profound theological statements he makes in any of his letters.
I'd love to throw out there that being the head of the household, being the man, the organizer, the planner, the projector, that kind of thing, I think that is the original participation award. Throwing out there, it's
oh
like,
my God, I love that.
It's because the dad. No offense to Dadpool. It's because the father, the head of the household, the guy, after he's contributed his seed, what the fuck else is he doing?
Oh my God!
But you have to make him feel equal, right? So why not build his ego? Why not make him feel better by saying, "Oh yes, honey, you are the reason why we are able to function."
This is so fantastic, because
you're providing for the family.
Yeah, you are doing more than anyone else here.
Right. And do you know what I love is how many men over the centuries have written to justify this head of the household role, right? It's philosophical, political, and then the Christian writers adapt it into some of their later writings.
Right. But when you look into the background of the people that are making those claims, the ones that are writing about it,
I'm with you.
The psychology of their origins.
Yeah.
Where were they? Their dad wasn't present, right? Their mom was there for them the whole time, and their mom raised them to believe that they were the best, youngest, just the strongest young man there is, and that there is absolutely nothing wrong with you, and that God loves you in all ways, and that you are going to be a strong gentleman someday. And
well, I mean, I'm thinking of ancient writers when I say that, ancient philosophers.
Oh yeah, no, well, yeah. Think about it. That's still something that I would have expected to have occurred.
Right.
With the whole maternal. Well, there's a reason why the whole mother-son thing is a lot different than the mother-daughter relationship, right? A mother-daughter relationship, automatically a mother will want to enable their daughter to do all the things, but then has to knock her down to make sure that she understands that when she gets married, she is not the head of the household.
So I have kind of a unique perspective on this. Dr. Bird.
I find, sorry.
Sure, you don't know anything about me. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I have 4 small boys, all under the age of 10.
That is not a participation award. You're actively doing things.
That's a lot, yeah.
But I'm also an Iraq War veteran. So I'm a medal. Cool stuff, right? So I often get guys when they find this out about me. Oh, you're a stay-at-home dad? Oh, you're not a real man. You're a beta male. I'm like, bitch, do you know how many loads of laundry I do a day? How many dishes do you know?
Fight me.
Yeah, so when I'm supposed to go out and rake coal for a living and break my back, that's what's gonna make me a man? Fuck off. So
fuck off. I'm gonna deal with my kids.
It's really interesting that there are still people today who will give a man flack for being a stay-at-home dad. Like it just
Nuts.
it just stuns me that still happens. I know it
Like
does,
my
but
wife is the breadwinner for the
Yeah.
family. Like,
and
I
you're
have no
fine with it,
problem
right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry,
She's-
just
she's
throwing it
okay.
out there. Rachel's fucking fabulous.
I've,
Hashtag
I've,
go
I've
Rachel.
really started to like her over the years. Okay.
Yeah. No, back to, I mean, kind of this whole what's going on there over the centuries that we have over and over again. We have philosophers, political scientists, religious men who are tapping into this framework, this idea of the male as the head of the household, and therefore he is automatically the man in charge of the woman, the father in charge of the children, which is just like who's doing the daily rearing, right? The parent that's at home does, right, and then the master over the enslaved peoples. But that this idea is still alive and well today.
Or Dr. Kip.
Oh, hey, Kip.
By the way, Dr. Kip is the one that recommended you to me.
Oh,
Have you heard
yeah.
of Dr. Bird?
I didn't know that.
And this was like a few weeks ago, and I was like, "Oh yeah, she sounds cool as shit." And then I got your book and read it. I was like, "Oh my god, I want to interview her so
I want
bad."
her here.
I've had a really good time interacting with him. We did a panel on slavery in the Bible and early Christianity last weekend. It was, anyway, and it was just fun to banter, kind of in the preliminary working up to it, all of our exchanges getting ready. He's a great guy.
He's okay.
Very
okay.
Well, very clever. Very balanced.
Kip knows that he's. I mean, it's been over a year now, but like Kip, the way that I was introduced to Kip was reading his article in Scientific American back when I was like, oh god, when it first came out like 2 years ago, and I didn't know who he was, and the next thing I knew, like he was going to be on the show, and I just straight up fangirled like the whole time.
Totally. Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, this is such a big deal. He found forgeries. Like, this is so unreal. Like, anthropologically speaking, this is something that normally got rejected anytime someone brought it out, but they published this. They pushed it forward, which is crazy. Anyway, sorry.
It's
sad about it.
Enough about Dr. Kip.
It's great though. No, I appreciate the fangirling.
I call him Daddy Sea Scrolls.
Daddy Sea Scrolls. I love it.
I'm trying to make that a thing.
Sorry, I was just throwing it out there. Anyway,
but keep going with what you were saying, Dr. Bird. I was very invested.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, and I have lost my train of thought. What were
the roles
the man being the head of the household.
How nuts is it that the man who is almost never home
exactly
is supposed to be in charge of the home and the children and everybody in the home, and even though he's never there. And
it is, in a sense, seen as his responsibility, right? Exactly. And it is on his shoulders if the house is well run or not. Like everything about the whole thing is all about, it's very phallocentric, right? It's all about the men, and they're getting back to Natty's point, their egos and their whatever, right? But it's consistent over the centuries, over the millennia, I just think it's really fascinating that we have these ancient, I keep thinking about the ancient ones, that are so highly revered. And it's really just their insecurities are what's fueling all of it.
Now, not to mention the fact that we as women are considered emotionally unstable. Always emotionally unstable. We have no control over our emotions, right? Yet it is
though every single war that's ever been
exactly. It's thank you.
Feelings is one of the main reasons why he has to be the one in charge, is because otherwise, he'll feel left out, and just humbug. Like I'm sorry, that wasn't very scholarly the way that I phrased that, but like they'll literally be his ego is what drives his ability to be a man, and if that ego is not fed, then that manhood, that entire being or purpose in his mindset, because of the way that they're raised, because of their background, tends to be completely destroyed. And then the next thing you know, the house is in shambles. Why? Because the guy is or the person that's in charge of the household is obviously not doing okay.
Mm,
So, but
mhm.
like the wife's holding it together. The maternal side, the like all the kids are functioning, but it might look great, but if the man's not happy, nobody's happy, right?
And the wives get absolutely no credit at all. They're erased completely. They get all the focus, especially in antiquity, is on the
Mhm.
man.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know what to
And
make of that. Like,
no, and going back to your earlier comment, I think I'm looking at you. I'm like, which name am I supposed to use to refer to you? Just Dadpool, or like, should I call you Dadpool?
Ricky.
What should I call
Ricky
you?
is my real
Ricky's
name.
fine. Okay, I'm sorry
Yeah.
because I was going to ask that ahead of time, but I
Ricky,
got
I'm
Yeah,
Dad.
fine.
yeah.
Right. My real name's
I got
Ricky.
it since I got here late. I was like, oh shoot. But we see it in the text. So this is me being a biblical scholar, if you don't mind, for just a minute. Oh, we
Yeah.
have children
Please do.
interrupting. Yeah. So
Not right now.
I just want to let this moment.
Sorry, my kids are.
I just wanted to let the moment be. Yeah.
Go play. Go do something.
Little parenting moment.
Yeah.
Just making the point
We don't
about.
get to see this very often.
We're just making the point about you being
He's being the mom.
being the stay-at-home dad. Yeah, the parent who's doing that kind of work. But even in the text themselves, right? So we have Galatians 3:28, where Paul makes this radical, democratic, whatever, and then, by the time he gets around to 1 Corinthians, he's got some positive things about women, and then he's being all misogynistic and sexist all over again, and he can't help himself. And then we have people writing in his name who are, his egalitarian framework that he set up early on gave some women some power, it even gave enslaved peoples some power, and that is perceived, I think, and there are many New Testament scholars who would agree with this, that was part of the problem, is the egalitarian nature of the meeting and happening in a house space was being misinterpreted. And so they were, in a sense, being perceived as politically subversive because you're letting a woman have the say in a household space. Like, what? And so that is part of why we see 3 letters in particular take the household code rhetoric, that framework of the husband to the wife, master to the enslaved, father to the children. We see that 3 different times in the Newer Testament writings where we've got to set this straight, people. We got to impose the proper...
Keep the story straight, okay? This is how we're going to say it. This is how it's going to go.
Yeah, we're
Can't
going
mess that up.
So anyway, so we have, to your comment earlier, Ricky, about, women starting things, and then when things get set up, men end up taking over. There are lots of ways perhaps to explain it, but I do think that's part of why we see this in the Newer Testament writings, this reintroduction of patriarchal norms and household structure directed to the people within the Christian church space, because those spaces overlap, right? Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Have you had any interactions with Dr. Alexiana Fry?
No, just today on Twitter about something else. I was asking for some help on something. And
oh my God, you two need to. She specializes in Old Testament and trauma.
Yeah, I just asked about trauma and how.
And she has so many cool things to say on the topic, okay. And it sounds a lot very similar to some of the things you're saying. Like, this is just men trying to cope with their, you're the workhorse. Mm-hmm. That's your role. Yeah. You go and you make bricks. That's what you do. That's your whole life. You go make bricks. And so these men are writing like, yeah, but because we make these bricks, society functions. So, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, exactly. And then the philosophers and the political scientists also say, oh, and by the way, we need your house to be well run or the whole society falls apart. And so back to your point, both of your points, right? It's like, but I am making it work. But it's like, actually, the woman is making it work. So we're going to put a little little patriarchal cover over all that, or however you want to look at that, right? And yeah, make it all sexist, whatever. Make it all about the men again. I don't know.
No one gives her a sheet
veil in and let the puppet talk
to write it down.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I mean, we see other similar things happening with women in leadership or important women early in the Christian movement that are overcast or overshadowed. even within the texts themselves. So like we saw that. I mean, that's why I love to talk about Mary Magdalene, right? She's important.
Oh, can we?
Even in terms of, let's.
Can we?
Even in terms of like the texts themselves say that she is, right? She's the only one present at all 4 empty tomb scenes, right? There are different lists of people that go to the tomb after his death and burial, but she's there in all 4. And actually in John's gospel, she's the only one who goes initially. And,
That's right.
And she's, and in the Luke's gospel is the one that tells us that women were actually disciples. But most people don't know that or see that, and they're kept from seeing it. But it says in Luke chapter 8, that the disciples, meaning the men, were all with them, and a bunch of women who provided for everybody. So it's like, this whole gospel is brought to you by the wealth of women who were good with their money, and Mary Magdalene is listed first in that setting, And so she is the one whose reputation is tainted by overlapping her and her name with a sex worker, and so referring to her as a prostitute or a whore or whatever you want to call her. So in her past life, she was a prostitute, and so that's why we can't trust her. Sound familiar? Like the very thing you were talking about with David Falk and Francesca Stavropoulou? Yeah, like
full circle. We're going full circle.
Totally. Yeah, the best way to denigrate a woman's reputation is to say something about her in a sexualized way. And it works. And how many different ministries to sex workers? Don't get me wrong. Like I see both sides. I see the whole picture on the realm of sex work, right? But for people who want to do ministry or try to help people get out of sex work, notice how many times Magdalene is associated with that ministry. Today, still. People think that Mary Magdalene was a sex worker. There's nothing in there that says that. There's a story right behind. It's not in there.
Yeah.
So it's an overlap of 3 different stories mixed together is how you get that. But anyway, go ahead.
What do you make of Paul's account in 1 Corinthians 15, where he obviously is citing a creed that predates himself? He says that Jesus first appeared to Peter and James, and then the 12, and then the 500, or the Pentecosios, whatever. He doesn't mention the women. So what do you make? Do you think that because the women first showing up at the tomb is in all 4 of the Gospels, right?
Totally.
Why does Paul, who's writing earlier the Gospels, why does he not mention the women? Do you think that the women were actually the first ones to discover an empty tomb, or do you think Paul is trying to erase them from the narrative? What do you make of that?
I love this question because it's one I've never had posed before. And so I'm not familiar with even the part of 1 Corinthians you're referring to, but it doesn't matter because I can work with the question, but it makes me want to go look it up later. There's actually a related, but like clarification I need to make in response to your question, and that is the book Permission Granted. The printed version has my old take on Paul.
Oh, you mean this book right here?
Yeah, sorry. That book right there. Yeah,
I just happen to have it next to me. Sorry,
just have it right. There's a section in there where I'm talking about his Corinthian correspondence, and the published version is my old take on it. And when I have copies that people buy or that I give away, I have an insert I put in there explaining that I've changed my mind on what I think Paul's doing there. And it's partly because of Antoinette Clark Weyer's book, the Corinthian Women Prophets, Corinthian Women, CWP, yeah. And I had read it in grad school. It didn't sink in with me. And so I have colleagues who've taken me to task on that section of my book, Permission Granted. And so I just want to acknowledge that people have all kinds of ways of reading Paul in general. I do think that one of the things he's doing in the correspondences with the people in Corinth is trying to undermine or tell those women prophets to get back in line. So that said, I think that is also helpful to keep in mind because, in 1 Corinthians 12, he talks about people having gifts and just use it. He doesn't talk about gendered gifts. He talks about if you've got the gift of prophesying, do that. If you've got the, teaching, do that. And yet when it comes to women prophets doing it, he actually seems to have a problem with it. And so it makes me wonder, without having looked at the passage you're referring to, to what extent his own misogyny, unacknowledged, even though he tries to write some egalitarian stuff, he's still sexist. And so it sneaks back in to his rhetoric, to his thinking, to his logic, to his whatever. And so it could be that he didn't ever hear that part of the story, that he didn't ever hear about women going to the empty tomb first. It could be he did and he didn't care. It could be that, right? I mean, that he's really only banking on what men are saying here or hearing, and that's part of why and how he's trying to undermine the women prophets who have a message to share, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but I think I love that you asked a question and gives me something new to think about with Paul. And, I'm sure someone has written about it out there. I just haven't seen it. And I love it because I think your question raises the point. We can have an intention, right, of being whatever, loving and just egalitarian. But then when we see what it looks like when it hits the road and it starts actually playing out that way, your true orientation is going to come out, and his being somewhat sexist and elitist. And he talks, like his language is very elitist, and he doesn't seem to mind using
the Jew of Jews.
Yeah. Well, and he doesn't seem to mind playing with the realm of enslavement to make his points. Like, that's just fucked up if you ask me, but he does it over and over. And doesn't seem disturbed by it. Like, he's making really important points this way. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, more or less.
In a roundabout way, I think he knew about it and he didn't care and he didn't want to give them props, right? Or he hadn't. I'd say, I think it could go either way. I don't know, but I think
it's entirely possible.
Yeah.
Huh.
I love your energy, by the way. Can I just say that real quick?
I'm really enjoying it. I'm very I'm just happy.
And there's a lot of I like it. One of the challenges I've learned with interviewing scholars is a lot of them are kind of two-dimensional when it comes to the personality aspect.
Yeah.
And I've had to say, like, it's not completely unusual when it comes to someone in
in academia.
Yeah. And it's like I'll sit there and poke buttons, and anytime I see like any sort of spark, I will sit there and like pull at that thread and be like, okay, hold on, let's see if we can get, and then it won't go anywhere, and I'll be like, oh, like I thought I was gonna get some passion out of you, and nothing.
Yeah. So I love when I get to interview a scholar who has
a little energy
like you do. So thank you, appreciate that.
Connected to the importance of their work is the way I look at it. Yeah,
that is a big deal.
It makes the interview more fun and easier to do.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about you, Dr. Kip.
You are clearly an exception, Kip.
No, Kip walked in and had like a Metallica t-shirt on, and I was like, we're gonna be best friends.
Yep, exactly.
Dude,
exactly.
Yeah.
With impunity, yes.
Yeah, like, Dr. Kip is a huge metalhead, and that's another thing. Like, oh, you're a scholar of the Old Testament Dead Sea Scrolls. Cool. Oh, you're a metalhead.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Like, you don't often get to peer in through a window into the personalities of scholars like that.
Right. Do not.
So it's very fun when I'm like, oh, you're not just a bookworm.
Yeah.
Even though I have all the respect for you as a bookworm.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to say there's a place for that. Right. There's a place for that.
But you have other tastes and desires as well. Can we talk about those? Like, how do those things relate to your field?
Why do you think the way you do? Tell me all of the things.
Tell me how your brain works. I need to know.
I must know the things.
Yeah.
Correa's right. Yeah, I've been quiet because what she's been saying is just like, it just hits.
Oh, nice.
That is, Dr. Bird, you have no idea how much of a compliment that is.
Oh my goodness, it's really lovely.
Oh, it's because she is three-dimensional. I'm not watching a cartoon come in here and tell me and spout out a script. Like, she's telling me what she thinks, which is nice. I like actually picking the brain.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something I get to do very often, and you're volunteering it, which is even better. So I don't feel the need to pull that thread. I'll just like throw out a comment, and you're just like, and this is what I think, and I'm like, yes.
Well, that's what I came here to do. So
I love it.
Want to get your money's worth.
I love it when people actually use their brain actively in conversations versus like, passive aggressive discussions. It's rough. Speaking of sexism, that happens a lot when I start asking questions to men that don't want to answer them. Anyway.
So, okay.
Sorry, Kip's comments are making me laugh.
See, I don't pay attention to the comments when I'm doing one of these. Sometimes I do, but it's too fun and distracting, and so I try not to like watch comments. So I'm glad that you are, but I'm not. So my lack of reaction is not because it's because fair. I'm not.
By the way, if anybody in the chat has a question for Dr. Bird, feel free to ask.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be a super chat. Whatever.
Yeah.
Feel free. And Dr. Bird, if you see anything in the chat you want to address,
I can do that if you want me to do that. I can track with comments. I was going to say that I don't know what you know about me and my background, but I did.
You lived in Portland for a while, and I was reading on that a little bit.
Nice. Okay. Thank you.
Go on.
Yeah. I grew up in a very kind of middle of the road Christian family, but I had a very conservative, even fundamentalist swing for about 6 or 7 years. So I was doing like ministry, trying to bring teenagers to Christ, that whole 9 yards of like evangelical fundamentalism. So yeah, so that's actually a big piece of why I ended up going on to seminary first and then to PhD work was, I like that question, Courageous. Anyway, so that's why I care so deeply. And then so kind of back to your comment, about why am I so energized about what I'm doing, and connected is because this I chose to go into PhD work because I'm a teacher at heart, and I could see, and I knew firsthand from the way I had chosen to like subject myself to the scriptures and to their very restrictive expectations of women, and like choosing to be quiet so men around me could shine. Like I did all of those things when I was in this ministry. Yeah. On staff, volunteer in college, on staff after college. And and the things I was trying to teach kids about themselves as sinners, and all of that. So it's like, I knew all of these elements of ways reading uncritically and kind of with the grain can be harmful to people. And so I chose to do a PhD so I could be so people would take me more seriously. I didn't need help figuring out how to be good at communicating this stuff. Like I was a teacher at heart. I had an education minor in undergrad. Like that's what I do. Most academics are, it's the other way around. They get into academia because that's like the only place they feel safe and comfortable, and like, oh wait, and I have to learn how to teach, So that's why all of this matters to me. All of it does. And yeah, that's just a little bit about my background. But I love the question. You'd love to hear me talk about 1 Peter and how the church has used that. Oh yes, let's talk about that. That is a great
question, Chris.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah,
like that's my dissertation. Okay.
Please, if you wanted to. I don't care. Just tell me what you want to talk about.
No, but here's the thing, folks. So I started PhD work at Baylor University, and
I've been there. Sorry.
Have you? No,
yeah, I used to live near College Station, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a whole story to that, but go.
Okay. Go. Okay. Yeah. No. Waco, interesting town. I literally went to the compound on a first date with someone. I don't even know what to do with that. I just think it's really fascinating.
What?
Yes.
You know Dr. Tabor. You know Dr. Tabor.
No, I don't know Dr. Tabor. No, I don't know Dr. Tabor. I know who he is, but
we interviewed him a few months back on.
Did you? Yeah.
On that whole thing.
My gosh, anyway, no, I would be really intrigued to. I think he would be intrigued to hear about this date because like he didn't get to. He was one of the negotiators with the Koresh.
Oh, was he really?
Yeah, he was
he wrote a whole book on it. It's nuts.
Like it's.
But
I had no idea.
Keep going with your. I don't want you to.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, like totally random. I'm like, wait, what? Okay. Anyway, the reason I point out that I was at Baylor first is because it was a different experience, and it was a very difficult 3 semesters of graduate work. And I'm grateful for it because of what it gave me, even though it crushed my critical thinking. And I loved every minute of being at Vanderbilt after that. But I started at Baylor, and the first semester, one of the courses I took was a seminar on First Peter, and I also happened to have living upstairs from me a young couple, not married. They had a child together, and just adorable. And she was lovely, and he was always kind of gruff, and I didn't really care. But I started to pay attention because I would sit at my table working after dinner, and above me, and I would listen to, more nights than not, their conversation would turn into yelling, would turn into slamming, would turn into throwing. What, I wasn't sure, her or other items. And I could tell that was happening more nights than not, that some form of physical abuse was happening. Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit of a story here if you can just bear with me on this.
I'm invested.
So, okay. So I'm in an apartment complex, right? Very small, but apartment complex. And it just so happens the woman across the hall from me was volunteering in a woman's shelter. Okay. And so I was like, Ricky Ty, what's the deal? Like, should I call the police? Like, what should I do? And she's like, nope, that's the last thing you do, because that makes it worse for her after the people leave. Like, it doesn't get better, it gets worse. And so I'm doing all this stuff. And meanwhile, I am literally very systematically working through the book of First Peter, dissecting, pulling apart every single noun, verb, adjective, adverb, and talking and looking at it in context and what's going on here. And everybody else in that seminar was reading the part that's addressed to women as very positivistically, everything is good here. And I'm listening to this passage that tells women to be submissive to their husbands, to silently submit, that you can win them over with your behavior. I'm literally listening to that advice play out above me every night, right? Every week. And so that's what sent me into wanting to look at why did this language become co-opted and used in a Christian letter? Like, why are you telling a woman? And the more I looked into it, the more I realized the language in that 1 Peter 3, 1-6 it just absolutely parallels what we know about abusive relationships. It tells her to be quiet and to be submissive. And we know that abusive relationships are about whoever the abuser is, because it can be in same-sex relationships or hetero, and it can be the male or the female. It tends to be the male who is the abuser, but it's not only. But for a talking point, he tries to keep her secluded and isolated. And there's language in First Peter that tells women not to dress themselves, make sure you're dressing yourselves modestly.
And First Peter 3.
Yes, 1-6.
1-6.
Yeah. And so, like, when you tell someone how to dress, right, you're shutting off their personality. Even if there were in context good reasons for it, it's still, you're controlling the person physically. You're controlling who they can think of themselves as being. This is why I actually really care about what we wear. But, anyway, it's just all kinds of things. And then the clincher for me is the end. First Peter 3, 5 and 6.
Real quick?
Please.
Okay, here we go. In the same way, you wives, be submissive to your own husbands, so that even if any of them are disobedient to the word, you may be won without a word by the behavior of their wives. I'm reading from the New American Standard. As they observe your chastity and respectful behavior, your adornments must not be merely external, braiding your hair and wearing gold jewelry or putting on dresses, but let it be the hidden person of the heart, which is imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is precious in the sight of God. For it is this way in former times the holy woman also, who hoped in God, used to adorn themselves, being submissive to their husbands, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, and you have become her children if you do what is right without being frightened by any fear. Yeah.
That's the part to women. And then the verses addressed to men are actually kind of interesting because it calls woman the weaker vessel, which is always kind of fun to talk about. But so there is
Let me do verse 7 real quick.
Okay.
You husbands, in the same way, like this makes you equal, like
right.
somehow, right?
Somehow.
In the same way, live with your wives in an understanding way as with someone weaker, since she is a woman. She can't help it. Guys, she's a woman. She was born that way.
Right? She can't, just tolerate it.
And show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, so that your prayers will not be hindered. Yeah.
That's equal treatment for
nuts.
sure, right? Yeah, isn't it? Okay, so can I talk about the parts of that like make me go aside from the fact that it's all that,
Oh yeah. No,
yeah. So I do want to this is me like it's related, but okay, tangent. In both the Hebrew Bible and the Newer Testament, we shouldn't, in my opinion, ever see husband or wife, because there isn't a noun for it in either case. We should just be seeing men and women. But
interesting.
Yeah, it's a very powerful element of teaching people how to think about biblical marriage or marriage today. But that's a tangent. I can come back and talk about that when my next book comes out.
You could write a whole book on the
I actually did. It's called Marriage in the Bible. What do the texts say? Yeah.
That whole thing. If you make people stop using certain words and start using other ones, their words, the words themselves will change the way they think.
Exactly. No, I'm right there with you.
If the dialogue doesn't change,
it is very powerful. Language is powerful, right? I'm with you.
Powerful.
Yeah. So I just turned in that manuscript. It'll be out in a few months. So anyway, okay. So the parts about that drive me the most crazy are the parts that say I always find it interesting what different translations are going to do with that passage. But in verse 5, when it talks about the gentle spirit, which is of what it most say precious in God's sight, and that makes me want to do a big fuck you, because it's of great worth, and precious to me sounds very like condescending. Do with that what you will. Yeah, precious in God's sight. Right? Isn't that sweet and precious? Yeah. No, it's of great value to God. Anyway, and then there's the other piece where it's like gentle and quiet spirit. Oh, I'm screwed then, because I do not have either, and I'm not willing.
Why does God need women to be quiet?
Thank you.
Just
control them. To control them.
This is
a text written by men.
Peter's advice on
what. We're like, ladies, stop arguing with me. It pleases God if you stop arguing with me.
It pleases God. Yeah, it pleases God if you don't question things. Just don't question anything.
Right.
Please God, and don't just stop.
Okay, and then the next part is when it says that in the same way women of old used to do this, right? When they obeyed their husbands or whatever. So the question is, at what point in the biblical storyline does Sarah actually obey Abraham? Not tell him what to do, which is, according to their culture, she does what you would expect, which is go get someone else to try to help him have a baby. But when does she obey him? It happens twice, in Genesis 12 and Genesis 20. And it's kind of the same story redone the second time.
Right.
But in Genesis 12, you were both nodding. Do you know? Do you know what it goes on there when what she does that's being obedient?
And just
you're being taught something. This is exciting.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot. You were both nodding. I know I didn't want to put you on the spot.
I'm nodding because I'm like, yeah, Sarah was a bitch in some places.
I know what you're talking about.
She was pimped out. Right?
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
I'm okay with Sarah having attitude, but I want to hear about when she obeyed, because I'm not that. I studied science more than the Bible, so I don't actually have scripture by.
It is stunning if you think about it, because this is the very first story you get of Abraham and Sarah. They're still being called Abram and Sarah. And he's like, hey, look, you're beautiful, and we're headed into Egypt, and so like they're gonna kill me to take you. So why don't you just tell me you're my sister? Blah blah blah. And the whole time, and then he hands her over to the Pharaoh. Pharaoh gives him a lot of goods, and the whole time she gets not a single word. She is utterly silent. So she is put in a position to be raped, and she is obedient. And then it happens again in Genesis 20. The narrator goes out of his way to say, oh, but she's fine. Nobody touches her. Okay, so here's the thing, folks. This is the one time.
Whenever does that happen? Sorry, I'm just like,
No, this
when
is
a woman
the
gets like, it's the new shiny toy, he's going to want to play with it.
exactly.
Anyway, sorry.
No, it's right. That's right.
Anyway.
It's actually expected, right? You've
Yeah.
given your woman, he's given you goods.
It's an
Obviously,
insult
he's
if
gonna
nothing
have sex with it.
happens. Yeah.
But this is the one time in the Christian Bible, so both the Hebrew Bible and the Newer Testaments, the one time Sarah's held up as someone to emulate, and it is when she is being raped or being threatened with rape as a part of the survival of herself and her husband or her partner. So First
Yeah.
Peter 3 holds up a woman in sexual abuse as someone to emulate, and you're her daughters if you do what is good and are not frightened by terrifying things. Every English translation tones that down. I was interested to hear what NASB did with it. They're not too bad. That's one of the better ones. But
By fear.
yeah, I think if you're not frightened by terrifying things or terrified by frightening things, because this is a frightening situation she's been put into. Well, so we know that just like the way Abram treated Sarah, we know this whole thing is happening for women in Asia Minor, where right, they don't become a what we call wife until they've been handed over to a man. No, it's true. I mean, she's but we know that the women and enslaved peoples were being abused. They were experiencing abuse at the hands of the master or their husbands because of this whole mix up of things going on. And if your wife isn't worshiping the same God that you are, this causes problems at home. And if that's what's happening, is these women or enslaved peoples are part of a.
You're not muted.
Sorry, ignore me.
No, I don't. I kind of want to let it happen. Like it's just in the moment, it's happening.
My wife just got home from work.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I'm like, I got you Corona
Love you, Rachel.
because I know you had a long day at work.
So
anyway,
it's just that Peter is, whoever's writing this letter knows that there's abuse going on, and he's telling them to endure it, just like he's telling the slaves in the previous chapter. Very extended, the most extended section to enslaved peoples is in the previous chapter, telling them all to suck it up and deal with it and just survive it. But it's problematic because
it's the acknowledgement for me. It's the fact that he acknowledges it and then says, just suck it up. Like that's it for me. I was just like, no.
Yeah. and the language at the very opening of it, which says, women, you can win your partner over with your actions.
Right.
This is not true. I think that he meant well, and I think he wanted that to be true. But what we know happens in human relationships is if it's abusive, there's not a damn thing you can do to make it better. It will always continue to get worse. There may be a moment where the abusive partner is like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Let's start all over. I promise I'll get better. And it might be better for a little bit, but then it always gets worse again.
Yep.
And so this language in 1 Peter has contributed to pastors counseling women to stay in abusive relationships. Period.
Oh
just
my God.
Yep.
Yeah. And to lots of people believing that that's the way it works, is if you just are kind and just don't, and talk about living on eggshells, right? Walking like the whole thing, living in tension and the whole time, like what? Anyway, so that's to answer the question, courageous. That's what that's about.
What is your opinion on Proverbs 21? I gotta hear it.
Proverbs 21 or Proverbs 31? The Proverbs 31. Yeah, 31 woman.
Yes, 31. Sorry, yeah. The biblical, the ideal biblical woman.
Yeah.
Like,
that's a great question. I like it. Thank you.
When you read about this, and because I was a Christian for 15 years.
Yeah.
And I went to Bible college because I wanted to be a Bible scholar or pastor or whatever.
I can relate.
Led me.
Totally.
And that's ultimately what caused me to become an atheist.
It's the kind of thinking you got to do in the midst of it all.
Kinda.
Yeah. Bring in your critical thinking to it. That's cool. Mm-hmm.
So but you read these things and these pastors are like, this is the ideal woman right here in Proverbs 31.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start looking at it once you're no longer a Christian and you read the same things that you read when you were a Christian, they hit different. Boy, do they hit different.
Can you say something about that? Do you have 30 like do you have specifics in mind? Or I'd love to hear your take because I think that could be really interesting.
So hold on, let me
Yeah.
my Bible here. Let me pull this out real quick.
Starting in verse 10. Yeah.
I was not prepared at all.
No, but it's good.
I'm intrigued. I'm watching. I'm listening. Keep
Okay.
going.
You did the thing again.
I did the thing. What thing to do? Oh, oops. Okay. I hit a button. Okay, Proverbs 31, starting in chapter 10 or verse 10.
Mm-hmm.
An excellent wife who can find, for her worth is far above jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack or gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of his life. She looks for wool and flax and works with her hands in delight. She's glad, you guys. She's so thrilled to do your laundry. That's what that fucking means.
Well, I mean, also that she's good at making garments. And
Yeah, I
she's
know.
good.
I'm being
No, but I appreciate your funny, like, I think I
Actually,
appreciate it.
I have a comment on the concept of flax. There is a lot of study that has been shown that flax for the common man, when made properly and when layered properly, actually is an armor and can be made into armor.
Really?
Yeah, so there's a professor, and his name escapes me,
Okay.
but I remember talking to him at a archaeology conference because he's an experimental archaeology professor from, I think, Michigan, and that paper bound Bible. And he found out that the common man, so Romans, obviously they weren't hit with arrows and like knocked down constantly. Like there had to have been some sort of armor for the common man.
Mm-hmm.
And metal was not it, because that was left for
expensive.
like the centurions and all of the guys that are kind of higher up ranks. That they needed something they could easily fix and that they could easily function with. And it turns out after, I think he was working on it for 5 or 6 years, he grew flax organically. He used different sinew from different creatures to find out different glues that worked well. But he found out that rabbit glue, which would have been common in that area, and flax as a fiber, almost like a muslin type of structure, when weaved properly, or just weaved classically, if you layer it with sinew as a glue, and you layer it up to 8 times, but no less than 6 times, you can create a flexible armor that actually can stop arrows.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that is
why you're my co-host.
Right. So when I heard that, sorry, just hearing that passage, like I didn't remember that passage existed in all honesty, but I was just like, I could see it being a case for women helping patch armors, because when you get holes in that, all you need to do is have sinew and stick it in.
Kind of work with it. That's fascinating. I love knowing that.
Yeah, it's a protection for thine husband. Anyway, sorry,
yes.
Just a side note. Just
no, it's interesting. It's great. Thank you.
Better.
Yeah. That bear.
No, yeah. Something's moving outside, and that he's against
unacceptable.
that.
He's against that.
Unacceptable.
She is like a merchant ship. She brings her food from afar. She arises also while it is still night and gives food to her household. She wakes up early, you guys. Y'all can sleep in.
You're right.
Sleep in all you want. She's going to wake up early and prepare food for you.
Right?
Yep. That's what a good wife does.
That's what a good wife does, yes.
Okay. She considers a field and buys it. From her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She senses that her gain is good. Her lamp does not go out of night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff. 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 What is that?
The thing that helps you weave or sew. One of those two. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'm not a textiles person.
Yeah, no, that was
I've never
unfair.
liked doing
Like,
things with my hands like
am I
that.
reading this right? Yeah.
Yes, you
I
are
mean,
a distaff and a.
it-
Mhm.
I mean, as far as textiles goes, I was making chainmail earlier today, so
I
there's
love that. I love that.
You were making chainmail, of course.
I
you
was.
were.
So cool.
Yes.
So
And her
cool.
and her hands grasp the spindle. She
Mhm.
extends her hand to the poor, and she stretches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She makes covering for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. So, I could keep going, but I'm gonna stop.
Yeah, we get the picture. I'm really curious which parts of those you saw differently besides the laundry.
It's
if there were.
all about the woman's role and the woman's responsibility. The man is nowhere present.
Mhm.
There's no like the man is supposed to do this. The man is supposed. It's all the women. You wake up early. You cook breakfast. You make clothes for everybody. You toil over the land. You farm. You do everything. The women does everything.
Am
The
I
man is
hearing this
not
right when
present.
I heard it say dye it scarlet? Like is the color scarlet like red? Was that
I think it was
okay?
talking about the
Can we
material.
talk about the process of dyeing something red?
Sure.
Can we just talk about how fucking complicated that is?
Hold on
And
on that
Okay,
because I
okay,
know
I'm
we
just
could
really,
probably
I'm
talk
just
for an hour
that
about that.
simple concept is
Or we could talk about how you dye things purple.
right.
That's even more
Right,
complicated.
Right, because it's red
But-
and blue.
But
Okay, go on, sorry.
when you're reading these texts as a Christian man, you're like, this is what you need to look for in a wife.
Right. Of course.
And now that I'm not a Christian, I read these things and I'm like, what the fuck is the guy's job? Why is the woman? Why is the woman doing every fucking thing?
Participation award.
Get up.
Participation award. There it is. He needs one.
Do the fucking laundry your goddamn self. Do the dishes. What the fuck? That's my, because again, I'm a stay-at-home dad. I'm the one who does
Right.
the laundry.
You know.
We clean everything. So I'm like,
Totally.
bitch, get off your lazy ass and do your goddamn self. Why is it the woman's job?
Why is it so hard? Yeah.
It's not that hard.
This
It's
is why
not.
I
So-
said their ego must be pleased and they must have a participation.
You may
award.
have to pause your video
so-
game for a little while, but it's not that hard.
Right. You know, Rachel Held Evans did a year of biblical womanhood, and so she tried to do all the things. Like she tried to live it just to see what it looked like, right? She
Oh,
took
God.
she took 12 different things that are pretty standard, right? And she just tried to figure out how to sew. She tried to figure out how to make her own clothes. Like she tried to do the thing, right? Yeah, and being well known at the gate because, you know, she's taking care of things at home, so of course you can be well known at the gate. Anyway, I love that she did this experiment, and but that's what it reminded me of. But also my take on it now is that this is also very much a wealthy woman. She has servants. She has enslaved peoples in her home.
She buys vineyards.
She has enough extra to buy that kind of
That
land.
means you're loaded back then.
Totally. No, this is not your typical woman.
That you scraped out of the couch cushions.
Right. Exactly. And exactly. And the other thing about this is it's like Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart is getting to do all these things, but she has a crap ton of helpers behind the scenes making everything happen up until the last moment when she's like, right. Or she like talks about it, but someone else makes it happen. If you were actually trying to do all of these things, you would land in the emergency room, right? Like you're getting up early and you're staying up late after dark. Like both of those are listed here, and you're supposed to be doing it all willingly and like excited because this is your role. And like, aside from the fact that somebody had to make the clothes, this is an issue. Like not everybody wants to make the clothes. Like not everybody wants to know how to do business. Not everybody wants, you know. So it's like,
what happens when she's not good at making clothes?
Exactly. Like, exactly. It's like,
you gotta buy a slave that does.
You do.
You gotta go to the market and find the best sewing slave, and then you gotta protect those hands with your life.
Yeah. Well, and I just one random thing. I can't remember who said it first. I think it was my friend Peterson Toscano. He's like, what if this whole thing opens with verse 10 is kind of snarky, which is a capable wife who can find who can find someone that can do all of this shit.
And then it's like a newsprint advertisement. We're looking for
totally. And he was kind of doing like a little play on a Jewish mother, like, you know, kind of a snarky. But my point is, my take on it now is to point out the elitism, the ridiculous level of kind of enslavement, really, that this is actually asking of a person, the number of things and the amount of things and the extent of their energy that's being expended at others for other people. There's no question in my mind that she's actually really industrious. This person is really talented and capable, and she is involved in the city because she is doing business and she is out there picking out a choice piece of land. I think that's a really interesting piece of the whole conversation is, regardless of where the money is coming from, setting that aside, like this woman is important and powerful and industrious.
But they're not going to say it like that.
No. And it's not being said that way. It's not how people are taught it. It's not how I worked through this passage in my 20s. No, that wasn't how we worked through it.
It could even be like a guy who is married to this woman, and he's super happy in his marriage. He's like, yo, my wife wakes up early. She does all this stuff. Like, this is the way to live, you guys. Like, find yourself this woman. Trust me, bro.
I would argue that this is, in fact, a list that a guy wishes his wife would do. I wouldn't say that, like, I can see where the bragging aspect would come in, but at the same time, it's like, why can't we find this? And then, like, list of criteria.
An impossible standard.
Of course. Yeah. And then, of course, it's adding in the fact that, you know, the guy's too busy to go and find the land himself and to go and figure out where he wants to be. So if she makes that decision, then she'll be happy working it. So, you know, it's
like when I read it,
comment. I have opinions. I have thinky thoughts on them.
Sure. It's just like, what is this woman doing for herself through all this?
Yeah. Having children.
Is she an artist? Is she a musician? What does she do to unwind? Mm-hmm. What does she do to enjoy life? Mm-hmm. Nothing. Her entire existence is just to serve the man and her community.
Yeah. And I do think that this is where we do need to be careful, because I think that's a really important observation. And I do think that life was hard. So I don't know that there were a lot of, you know, Calgon take me away moments, you know, for anyone.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, even though she is well off, the person being described at least is very well off. I don't know that. I mean, I don't know. I do want to be careful not to be careful which way we impose what we think of as being much more appropriate onto this, because right. I mean, it was a hard existence. Yeah, regardless of how wealthy you were.
No one's denying the fact that ancient world was ancient.
Yeah, I think that's part of what I'm trying to get at. But
you were about to die of tooth decay in the like. That's who you. If you're a biblical author and you write anything, you're like, next week I'm gonna die because my tooth hurts. So yeah, life was not easy.
No, and you know it's interesting. This is a total tangent, but last week I did the thing with the slavery, you know, and I was chatting about it with my parents afterwards, because they've been very supportive and they really thought it was an interesting thing. And I made some comment about, you know, the whole sexual use thing of enslaved peoples. I won't give them away, but one of my parents made a comment about, well, what did they know about sexually transmitted diseases back then? I was like, well, why do you think the life expectancy was so low?
I have some things to say about that.
Please do.
Oh, it depends on community. It depends on where you are in the world at the time. And it depends on how closed off your community was. And there's a reason why some men with multiple wives were able to coexist and live as long as they did, is because they would kidnap, you know, the ones that sorry, I used the word kidnap. That seemed a little aggressive. I'm still going to use it. So they would kidnap the the women and marry them into their own little culture and their own little quiet group, and that would keep their
exposure to
their
others
exposure
to a limit.
limited. Exactly. The whole concept of, well, I'm going to use an anthropology story really quick.
Great.
There is a tribe. Fuck if I remember the name of it, and I'm sure it will just pop up. It'll bother me for years. It'll bother me for hours until I figure out what it is. But there is a tribe that was in South America that was discovered by some people back in 1800, early 1900s, and they were a very sex positive group, extremely sex positive. They're like they tend to live to about 50, 60 years old, which is pretty good for somebody in the jungle, out in the in the wilderness. Their people were very commingled. Everybody was kind of fucking everybody, and as soon as that was kind of how things happened. There was no set partnership unless that was a choice that someone would make, and even then it was very open. And one of the big things that happened, because white man was the one that was like, oh, I discovered this people, like they obviously must have all of the STDs and all of the diseases, right? None.
Right,
not a single disease,
right,
because it's a closed off community,
right,
and because there was nothing to introduce it. They didn't bring others into the whole concept. Like, it was not because of their sex positive attitude, they had plenty of people to continue the
community.
The community. The community kept growing. It was not having issues. But of course, then when some anthropology, and this is the problem with anthropology, right? Sometimes anthropology and sociology, somehow, like we no matter what we do, as soon as we interact, the discovery itself means that there's now a change in there. Right. So there's a whole philosophy behind that, and that sucks.
Yes.
But that entire group though is no longer sex positive. It is entirely has dissolved almost down to nothing as far as sex positivity. Because the guy was talking to one of the tribal leaders. It was mostly a matriarchal society, which is very interesting. But he was talking to one of the matriarch's favorite men that she would go and have fun times with, and talked about how he only had one wife, and like he was sharing information about him to this tribal, and jealousy showed up. And that was a concept that was not really well known until that moment. And there was murders and there was all sorts of things happening. And it's the entire society fell apart simply because of a conversation. And that is how fucking ridiculous. I'm sorry. That's so when you were like, oh yes, like everybody had short lifespans because of their sex. And actually I would argue that that's not really a reason.
I was being facetious. I just want to be
but
clear about that.
I just thought I don't want that idea to be popularized as to if you can't keep it in your pants, you're going to die young.
No, I was referring to specifically to how prevalent the idea of using enslaved peoples for sex was.
Oh, yes.
And just across the board, people within the church, within the early church, we're telling men to maybe you should stop visiting prostitutes because you might accidentally commit incest because of that female baby that you exposed at birth, that someone else came along and reared, because exposed children usually were taken in by slaveholders and slave traders. And predominantly those children were reared for prostitution, male or female. Right. So that's what I was referring to it was a big piece of the conversation.
Missed that.
Yeah, no, and enslaved bodies, people enslaved, it was understood that people could take advantage, whether or not it was your slave or someone else's. No, you out on the street could be addressed. So I was trying to make
I didn't mean to make you
offhand comment. No, it was just it's just really interesting how our
it is it's really depressing.
Different things, how much we know and don't know about that piece in particular, but just there's a lot. There's a lot.
Earlier traditions revolving around baptism. In the I forget what it's called, the vat of water where you're supposed to cleanse yourself before you enter into the temple.
The mikveh.
Mikveh, yes, thank you. It was
like
right on the tip of my tongue.
Hey,
I have tested the water from a mikvah. It is sketchy as fuck. Do not
That's
drink
where I was going with
water.
that. That's how disease was spread. And they
Yeah.
didn't know it. They all cleansed themselves in the same, 20,
That's an interesting
30,
way of looking at
50
it.
gallon water vat.
Interesting.
And they share diseases with each other. And they're like, hey, we're all getting sick all of a sudden. Why is this happening?
I was in the mikvah on Sunday.
Yeah.
What do
I
you
just
mean everybody's
cleansed
got
myself.
mono? That doesn't make
Why
sense
am I
at
getting
all.
sick all of a sudden? That's weird. That's
funny.
not supposed to happen.
It's funny.
Um,
To this day, though, like it's I don't know if this is true, and I'm gonna spread a lie if it's not true. But I was told by I'm gonna tell something that I think is gossip, but it sounds real. I haven't actually looked up the stats on this, but I just kind of believed it because he works at there's a one of my friends is a choir director for a Catholic church, and they have these little I want to say bleach tablets almost that they drop into the
Baptism font.
yeah, well,
the font that people dip their hands in as they walk in. Yeah,
and they do it every Sunday
Makes
to make
sense.
sure that nobody.
I've not heard of
makes sense.
But it's
Yeah.
like a little droplet, and I
Smart.
think it was issued by like the Catholic Church that has to be. That's like a
Makes sense.
way to
yeah.
keep things, but I don't know if that's a thing. I feel like it should be though. If it's not, but I know his church does it. I have seen the tablets. They,
Okay. Especially
but I just kind
COVID,
of assumed all
post-COVID.
churches did that, and now I'm like, maybe they don't.
I wonder if that was only introduced during the pandemic or if that was always there before pandemic. Okay, so
Oh, here
I
we
have
go.
I know. I have a fun little just other kind of ancient baptismal font story, which is I've seen
Please.
pictures of baptismal fonts. So the connection since this whole thing isn't Jewish, right? So we're bringing in a Greco-Roman idea here and applying it to how Jesus saves Gentiles, right? Like all the different ways in Greek and Roman and other religious traditions that Paul could think of to tap into and apply to Jesus, he does. So, right? So this whole participation in his death and then resurrection, and that's how you get like the power to conquer the cosmic sin idea. Okay, so that's what baptism is, right? You go under the water and then you come up and it's rebirth. And there's something really powerful and symbolic about this, right? And it's not Jewish, it's from other religious traditions. And I love the fact that you have that whole conversation, right, with Jesus and Nicodemus, where he's like, I can't be reborn, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, you got to anyway. And so there's some baptismal fonts that look like vulvas. And so you descend into the water and you
What?
come out the other side like you are being reborn. Is that not the coolest thing ever? 4th century, baby. Northern Africa. Yeah.
Oh my god, this sounds amazing, and I'm gonna have to look up pictures.
Isn't that awesome?
Freaking awesome.
And the whole concept of like female divinity in the Trinity is part of that, right? Because you can't have a vulva without a female, obviously, but you can. I don't mean to be anti-trans there, but my point is, right, that early on there was an embracing of a female part in the Trinity in some places. Look at you, Natty. What?
That.
He's
That-
convinced that the obsession with ritual
That-
cleansing
that's
led
what
to
I
the
was
end
just-
of the Qumran. Oh, that's interesting. Roman
Yeah,
Italian.
I didn't
Dr.
realize that.
Cooper-
I never talked to you
Right.
about that, but that's really fascinating.
Yeah, I
Dr.
thought
Tabor
that
has a
they were
lot to say about baptism in the ancient world.
interesting.
He
has
does.
fascinating things to say.
He does. That's true.
Yeah.
He has some really interesting opinions and some really interesting concepts. But it's the David Koresh part of the whole thing that keeps me interested. Is because he just keeps going back to, and when I talk to David, I was just like,
I'm
oh
the
my
opposite. I'm the opposite. I don't
Just
care
crazy.
too much about all that.
God. Oh, I'm
more
fascinated.
like,
Well, but I'm
tell
fascinated.
me about Paul. What do you
Yeah, how do
tell
I
me
make
about
sense of
the
that?
Essenes?
My next
Why
book is going to be
why
on
was
Paul.
John the Baptist an Essene?
gosh.
Why was the Q
Mhm.
document, removed from antiquity? Like that's
I
where
think-
my brain goes
Yeah.
when it comes to him.
There are all kinds of fun little mysteries, aren't there?
Oh, so many,
All sorts.
and they are very fun.
Hey, so I know this is a little weird, and you can tell me to just fuck right off, but
I probably won't.
you
I'm
did
ready.
mention that you had a first date. that ended up at the compound.
We did. Yeah, that happened. Mhm.
There a second date?
There was not. No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And when you went, did you like go and like meet people, or was it just like a okay?
It was like a tourist thing because he's like, I mean, it started out okay, but it was going badly anyway, and we were trying to figure out what else to do. And I think it had come up in conversation, and I was kind of in this like, oh, who gives an rat's ass at this point. And I was like, I'd love to see the compound. Like, and so it's at the time it was set up as it was still being used. There was still a community using it, but it also has a tourist attraction element to it, which is they had a building, at least at the time, with pictures of that horrific day, just explosion, fire, blah blah blah, and then like
this is after David Koresh was killed.
it's afterwards. So this was 2001. So it was a few years after.
Oh.
Yeah. And so you could see pictures of all the destruction that day, and then they had pictures of all the people who had died, and then they also had, at least at the time, they had a young what am I trying to say? Grove of trees that they had just planted of these lovely trees, one for each person who died. And so we walked around, like we could see, the bus that had been submerged, and you could see the ground, you could see some of the pieces of it. So it was set up as a little bit of a come see for yourself, but you could also tell that there were people still using the community, and the church had been rebuilt.
Interesting.
I know, it was a little like, I'm really glad I got to see it. It felt really
But like
creepy.
the first date thing. Nah.
Yeah, that was kind of I kind of just like that's part of the story because
I think it's
You
funny.
got a
I
story
mean-
out of it, at least.
what was that?
So you got a story out of it, at least.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Best story. Some of my best stories happened in Texas. They're weird.
God, yeah.
Oh,
Texas.
he has
is-
no idea about the compound. I lived on the compound. Nope.
I was
I-
born
well,
in Texas. Yeah,
you
that's
were
a weird
born in
point.
But I was no Raven. It's okay. Sorry, my dog is aggressively trying to love me. No.
That sounds uncomfortable.
The people that are watching, most of you guys know the story, but the long and short of it was I was hired to be a tutor for a family that lived on a sustainable organic farm.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but they weren't Pentecostal and they weren't Baptist, but they were something in between.
Okay.
And yeah, I
Not
had
Baptist, not Pentecostal, but a secret third thing.
a secret third thing that was very close to God, and that they
Little
knew
joke.
that they were in the right in this whole.
Gotcha.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like I was completely cut off from society, and I was like indoctrinated.
How
into it
long?
for 2 years.
Oh wow. Oh
Yeah,
wow.
but no.
Glad you
here's the
survived.
concept. The
Glad you
entire
survived.
time, I was not. The entire time, I knew I was an atheist, and I was like, I'm gonna get discovered at any second. Like they're going to find out, and yet it never happened. And to
Hmm.
this day, I still get Christmas emails from them.
Aw.
Yeah, it's really nice because like the girls are all like 20 something now, and it's really exciting. But there were 7 girls that lived there, and ranging from age 8 to 18. It was just kind of crazy. Anyway,
Intense.
so
Yeah.
Pento Baptist, Baptist-coastal, huge difference.
Heresy.
Heresy. But I mean, yeah, but like the entire time I was there, like I wanted to talk about the Waco disaster to the girls. I remember like talking about history in Texas, and the mom came in, just stormed in, and was just like, that is the devil speaking through you. You need to stop. And like I was just like, but this actually happened. And they're just like, no, that is the devil speaking to you. You need to stop sharing the devil's knowledge with my children. And I'm just like,
Wow.
it was anyway. So Texas has lots of stories. lots of stories. And that was in Cameron, which is only like an hour and a half south of Waco. So
Okay.
that's fun. Anyway,
All right.
I'll let that go. That's just a side note.
We've got about 15 minutes left.
Okay. Yeah.
Um,
What do you want to chat about?
Yeah, what haven't we
Let's
covered?
find
yet?
some nerdiness in her.
Trying to-
And she's been good about everything else. What
is like kind of like we were talking about Dr. Kip earlier, how he's a metalhead. What are some like nerdy things that you like?
Oh dear.
Game of the
Are
show is
you-
nerds and
are you-
heresy. This is
Are you like
nerdy.
a random book nerd, or do you find sciencey stuff interesting, or like do you like astronomy randomly, or are you like, I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas, but is there anything that like
Or a hobby? Do you have a
a
hobby?
hobby that you do that you're like, I mean, obviously you said you don't sew or anything, but
Oh, I don't actually have any good hobbies right now. I'm actually still kind of recovering from working way too hard for too long. I know that might sound either
No, I
trite or
understand. You lose your drive to do anything besides what you're doing when you're in that bubble.
yeah, it's actually kind of a big deal that I'm dealing with physically recovering from working 7 days a week for way too long, kind of a thing, multiple jobs.
Oh, wow.
She sleeps. That's her nerdiness.
Well, I'm extra glad you joined us today then.
I am really glad.
Trying to recover. Yeah. So I think the closest I come to nerdiness along those lines are like, I do like to listen to Hidden Brain while I work out, or I love shortwave. Like I like the nerdy kinds of podcasts. Yeah, I do like nerdy podcasts. So.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
no.
You're interesting. Okay,
I want
so
to
you're.
hear what podcasts you listen to. So you just said you No, I want to know because I listen to like a ridiculous, like a redonkulous.
Do you? Are you okay?
Yes.
No, I love Hidden Brain. I think there's something
Brain
magical about Shankar Vedantam.
Lovely.
And the work he's done. Yeah. And then I really love shortwave, but it's so short. It's like 10 to 15 minutes every day.
Have you, if you ever want to, as far as like story time, if you want to do something along those lines, have you ever listened to Lore by Aaron Mahnke?
I haven't.
You should. It uses facts and statistics and stories from the past to either prove or disprove, and he lets you make the decision at the end whether or not something is real or not, like a ghost story or something along those lines, or like stories of like a ghost ship that people have seen over time. But like he talks about the actual people who have actually seen it, and it's about an hour long, 45 minutes ish. But it's a good podcast to listen to. When I was doing archaeology down like in the woods out in Kisatchie National Forest in Louisiana, it was like muddy. It was like the boonies. You're out in the bayou. It's sketchy. Like, you expect to see like you expect to hear banjos, right? And I was listening out loud to murder podcasts.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That was a good way to mess with yourself.
Like, how are you not like jumping every time someone steps on a stick? I'm like, great.
Oh, Radiolab. Yes, Kip. Yes, that's another good one. Radiolab.
Yes, Radiolab.
I was trying to think. There's Peopling the Past, which is a really interesting one, and there's another history one, and I'm drawing a blank on it. I love this guy. He does like 10 to 15 minute ones on retelling a story that you've just never heard from this perspective or whatever. And I'm so sorry I can't think of the name of it.
Is it Lore and Legends? It's not Lore and Legends.
It isn't Lore and Legends. It's something history, something. Maybe someone else out there knows this one. But I also just can't help myself but want to say, but also there's a new podcast out called Wild Olive. Game-changing conversation about literature, culture, and the Bible, which my friend Jean Patrol and I are doing. Yeah.
Name drop.
Wild Olive. Anywhere you get your podcasts.
Did I tag that in the description?
I don't know because it's like kind of a new thing.
I should also make a note. Because of this conversation, I finally joined Twitter, so y'all can find me. And turns out no one has my name on Twitter, y'all.
You joined Twitter? What?
I just joined Twitter.
Oh my God.
I'm the opposite. I just joined TikTok, so partly because of this, partly because of this, and partly because of last weekend. Someone else.
I am Natty Nat in all of the things because apparently no one wants to spell their name Natty Nat.
Interesting way of spelling. Yeah.
Dr. Kip just joined.
It's because I bug people. I bug people to know their brain.
God, yeah, someone took a 6-minute clip from last Saturday's panel and put it on TikTok. I'm like, okay, I will finally get onto TikTok. And
god awful movies is a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really like
Big Trouble in Little China is one of my guilty pleasures.
I like this is produced by the Puzzle and the Thunderstorm crew. I really like Citation Needed from them. Probably most.
That's good.
Is that a thing? Is that a podcast? Is that a thing? What is that?
Yeah, it's from the same guys that do Cognitive Dissonance, the Skeptocrat, god awful movies. But they do one called Citation Needed, where they they tout it right at the beginning. Like we read, we pick a topic and we read a Wikipedia article on it, and we pretend like we're experts.
Oh,
So
that's
uh,
hilarious.
have you ever
And
listened to
they're-
Drunk Ex-Pastors?
So they talk
That's somebody
about
that you need to talk to, or somebody.
drunk ex-pastors. Oh my god, yeah, they're good too.
Yeah,
Anyway,
she needs to listen to them.
I don't.
but
I
yeah,
don't listen to ministry things for fun. I just don't.
That's fair. That's a fair thing to do.
History Palace is the one that I was trying to think of.
History
If
Palace,
anyone's
yes.
interested, this guy is
Behind
good.
the
He's
Bastards.
really
Oh
good.
my god.
Yeah,
you need to
Behind
listen
the
to
Bastards. I've tried a few times. They're a little much for me. I tried, and maybe I need to try again.
Some that are a little, but there's some that are really good.
I'm a little.
Sawbones
I was a little too stressed and anxious listening to them for some reason. I don't know. I don't know.
Sawbones is great. It's about medical history. It's like the discovery of different things medically speaking, and it's that one's
So
really good. Sorry, I'm scrolling through my list right now that I'm like
I can tell. Yeah. Well, you've got a lot since you have a
so you're
ridiculous.
Dr. Bird, from what I'm understanding, is you're learning how to unwind. You're learning how to not do so much and enjoy life in the moment. Is that kind of what I'm getting?
That is a true statement to a certain degree. It is not entirely, because I am like trying to be fully an independent scholar. And so right now I'm not having to pay all the bills myself. And so I'm trying to build up all the different things that can help me sustain being an independent scholar. So I teach a couple courses fully online through Portland Community College, which is where I lived for 8 years. And then, so that gives me some income, but then I need more than just that. And so right now, while I have a little bit of a window, I'm trying to do all the things I can do, to support
physical break.
Well, that, and also but then also working my ass off to try to create all these other things that could be income streams for me, but in a realm that I want to be doing instead of random ass stuff that just is helping me pay the bills. So I don't know if that makes sense. So yes, I am trying to find more balance, but I'm also trying not to freak out about the fact that in about a year I need to be able to sustain myself again. And so, all the different things I'm working on, like doing these kinds of interviews, which are really fun, but also getting exposure to like my books, the audio version of my book, all the different things. And then the podcast. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. The podcast.
Link in description.
Podcast, which is Olive. I'm sorry.
Wild Olive.
Wild Olive. Okay.
Game-changing conversation about literature, culture, and the Bible.
I like it.
We only have a few episodes out so far, but it's we did one season together under a different name just to kind of work out all the kinks of our kind of conversation. But anyway. So anyway, it's really fun, and we've gotten lots of great feedback about it. So very proud of that work.
Well, are you going to be recording it live as well? Like, are you going to be doing an online platform as well as the podcast, or
we might? Okay. After a while, we wanted to get a few, a couple dozen episodes in, just doing a regular. She's a literature professor. I'm a biblical scholar. She's been teaching the Bible as literature for 20 years, and I've been or 10 years or so, and maybe 20. I should get clarification on that. And I've been doing this, and we come at it very differently. So we have very different backgrounds in engaging scripture, but she brings in poetry in particular, is really powerful poetry that reads a biblical story differently than a lot of us were taught to read the biblical stories, and it highlights how it actually connects to people in a kind of like transcends history and helps us see the part of the story that we could actually like benefit from thinking about and connecting with, instead of all this judgment stuff that comes from the Christian traditions, at least. So anyway, so it's actually kind of freeing, and it's actually helps a lot of people to think about scripture this way. So it's really fun. And she's just lovely. So lovely work partner. Yeah.
I know. You're
all right. Well, I think that's a good place to end things.
Is that all right? Awkward for me.
So lovely meeting you.
And a little self plug there. Yeah.
We need to get her and Fry together.
Yes. Oh my god.
That'd be fun.
That would make such a good
fun.
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
I am so grateful that you two wanted to have a conversation with me. I was touched by it, and I love that Kip helped make that happen. But thank you for including me in, the conversations that you wanted to have. I appreciate that. And I hope there's
honors all
fun here for you.
picking people's brains. That's one of the fun things when it comes to anthropology is finding
Totally.
out how people think and from where their where the source of their knowledge comes from and their passions. And you just
Absolutely.
brought it to the table. You just are like, oh, and this is how I feel. And I'm like, thank you.
Like I'm just an idiot that got popular on TikTok for no reason.
I'm
I'd
Literally,
love to know how that happened. Yeah.
that's my origin story. I have a
I'm
bachelor's
just a
degree
crazy smart
in
person.
biblical theology, and so
Okay.
I
Yeah.
talk about things. And I have almost 500,000 followers on TikTok.
I
now.
saw that. Yeah.
And so I'm like,
So
I
we
didn't
need to do a
try for
TikTok
that. I
that
just make videos
advertises
for
just
fun.
her book. We need to do a
So-
TikTok that advertises her. Needs to happen.
I'm blown away that I get to talk to actual scholars like yourself. I've gone to interview Dr. James Tabor, Dr. Kip Davis, Bart Ehrman. Like I've gotten to
Nice.
interview all these people, and that's just fucking bananas to me. I'm just an idiot who makes TikToks,
It's
but I
nice.
get
Yeah.
to talk to y'all, and that's
It's
the
very
coolest
cool.
to me.
Well, it's really cool. I mean, honestly, I think it's fabulous, and I love that. Yeah, any connection, any promo that you give me from here is also really welcome. Really, I'm really grateful for. So, but whatever, like all of it comes together, I think, in the end, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
Making the most of your position or whatever, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. Like
Well, I have to jump off, but it was so
Okay.
lovely talking to you,
Well,
and I look
thank
forward
you.
to talking to
Yeah.
you again. And I'll
Thank
talk
you.
to you later, Ricky.
See you,
Thank
Nat.
you.
Okay.
So glad you could join today. Okay.
All right.
Thanks everybody for watching. And here's a quick reminder that I do not know how to end shows.
Hold on to your butts.